marks 1 year since Donald Trump's infamous photo op at St. John's Church at the height of the nationwide George Floyd protests. Further proof that one of his biggest lies about that day does not pass the smell test. The D.C. police, through an attorney, finally admitting that law enforcement used tear gas that day against peaceful protesters. You'll recall that June day last year, police cleared demonstrators from Lafayette Square so that Trump could walk over, hold up a Bible in front of the church that had been damaged the night before, and say cheese.
It didn't seem to be an expression of faith or of solidarity with faith. It seemed to be, as we've said before, an opportunity to clothe himself in the mantle of spiritual symbols and locations to, in some way, bolster or reinforce his own authority and message.
Now, after the photo op, Trump and his allies insisted that no one was tear gassed.
If the White House, the president, and his team had to do it all over again, would you have gassed and pummeled protesters to clear the park so the president could have a photo op?
So let me first address no tear gas was used and no rubber bullets were used. So again, no tear gas was used, no rubber bullets were used.
The president himself pushed the lie.
They didn't use tear gas. There's so much fake news. Most news is fake. They're corrupt and they're fake.
Those comments on Fox where he had backup.
There was never any tear gas.
So they threw some smoke bombs out and pushed them back. Wow. Armageddon, really?
Now, Trump's campaign doubled down. They said, quote, "It's said that a lie can get halfway around the world before the truth can get its pants on. This tear gas lie is proof of that." Tim Murtaugh, that spokesman, would go on saying, quote, "For nearly an entire day, the whole of the press corps frantically reported the news of a tear gas attack on peaceful protesters with no evidence to support such claims. Except there was evidence. There was lots of it. Tear gas is pretty unmistakable. It hurts, it burns. Your eyes and your nose and your lungs won't deceive you on this one." And my colleague who was there in the crowd at the time, CNN correspondent Alex Marquardt, said this, quote, "This no tear gas angle is ridiculous. I was in the middle of the crowd coughing up a lung. All sorts of projectiles were being fired at a peaceful crowd." And Alex went on, quote, "This was 25 minutes before the curfew. There was no obvious warning to protesters to leave. And then there were the pictures where you can see the aftermath of a tear gas attack. And there were witnesses under oath, like a major in the D.C. National Guard who was there, who said this before Congress.
I could feel irritation in my eyes and nose. Based off my previous exposure to tear gas and training, I recognized that irritation as effects consistent with CS or tear gas. And later that evening, I found spent tear gas canisters on the street nearby.
Now, Major Adam DeMarco served as the liaison between the National Guard and the Park Police. He called the use of force there deeply disturbing. But Trump's campaign tried to stretch the definition of tear gas and downplay the measures that were used, again, against peaceful protesters. Quote, "What the campaign said is completely consistent with what the Park Police is saying. There was no tear gas used. The media is trying to widen the definition of tear gas to make their own original reporting seem accurate. Except it was tear gas by the federal government's own definition of tear gas. The CDC defines tear gas as riot control agents and chemical compounds that temporarily make people unable to function by causing irritation to the eyes, mouth, throat, lungs, and skin." So fast forward to now, a year after Trump stood in front of St. John's Church, and the attorney for the D.C. police is finally admitting the obvious for the first time, that officers did use tear gas on protesters while defending their actions, that's how this came out, against lawsuits by protesters and the ACLU. This is what the attorney said, quote, "The curfew, violence of past nights, chaos created by federal defendants, discharge of tear gas in that direction was not unreasonable." And the attorney claimed that officers did not target specific protesters. Apparently, tear gassing a peaceful crowd indiscriminately is actually a defense. Though at the time, even the Trump campaign knew that it wasn't, as a spokesman demanded, quote, "Every news organization which reported the tear gas lie should immediately correct or retract its erroneous reporting." It has been a year. And finally, an answer that you can't just dismiss. To quote former Trump campaign spokesman Tim Murtaugh, who was actually quoting a made-up quote when he said it, according to the New York Times, it said that a lie can get halfway around the world before the truth can get its pants on. President Trump and his allies were certainly banking on that. They were dressed and out the door with their lie. Tear gas lighting at its worst.
Yeah, the only pants here are on fire, I think.
Exactly.